Thank you, everybody. Good morning. It's wonderful to be here. So I have to wander around. I don't think I can be pinned to the podium. And is this mic too loud? Are you going deaf out there? Thank you for the kind introduction. I only can say I hope your granddaughter is right about the growing up and getting hair. That would be fine with me. I'm going to move over here a little bit so you don't have to make yourself seasick going back and forth between myself and the slides. So I want to start here. And talking about enjoying yourself, you know, let's go surfing for a moment. Can you all see me okay if I'm down here off the podium? I'd much rather be with you all than kind of up there. So look at this picture. This is a 100-foot wave. A 100-foot wave. Now think about that. That's like a 9-story building coming down the street. And the 100-foot wave, you know, prior to about 5 or 6 or 7 years ago, was thought to be unsurfable, right? This monster would just tear you apart. In fact, you couldn't even start paddling fast enough to get going to be able to launch yourself down the face of the wave. Now, the key to being able to surf this 100-foot wave was understanding both the power and the context of the wave. So what do I mean about those two things? The power of the wave is pretty obvious, right? It's that constant churn that's taking you and the waves are constantly breaking, coming up against the shore, right? And so you have that constant churn happening all the time. The context, however, is really the key part. So these waves, it turns out, are really different depending on the undersea conditions, whether you're close to shore or out in the middle of the ocean, depending on the weather, depending on all sorts of different factors. And if you understood the context, you could surf these waves in places with names like Jaws or Maverick. But you had to get what the context of the area was. So if you could surf it, let's say, off the coast of Tahiti, you may not be able to surf the same wave off the coast of Portugal. And these waves just popped up in different parts of the world. And then what happened was, once people understood both this power and context, they developed all sorts of new methods of surfing, redefining the sport. They found new ways to rescue people who are in trouble. They found new ways of launching people into these waves, accelerating their speed using jet skis. They developed technologies like a hydrofoil that are really changing surfing, and also the surfing of these huge monsters. And by the way, that is a person down here, just to give you some sense of perspective on how big this is. So the surfing of these giant waves also brought tremendous enthusiasm and popularity to the sport. Now, why start with surfing, right? If you think about it for a moment, our economy is much the same way. It's the same metaphor, right? The power of the economy is the constant churn of what's called creative destruction, right? New companies are always being formed and destroyed, and the new companies are coming up as technology changes, and the context of the economy is always shifting. So in 1896, if you look back at the Dow Jones Industrial Average, the most widely held stocks in the US, you can see here they are all ag and commodity companies. Now, I also know many of you in here own small and medium-sized corporations, so you may not understand what American Sugar or American Tobacco or Chicago Gas has to do with you, but the context is the key part. Right, so here's a look at Conway, New Hampshire, back in 1896, an agricultural context. If you move forward to 1928, you'll notice we've moved into manufacturing, retailing, and radio starting to come online. And you have companies in here like Bethlehem Steel, right here, Chrysler, General Motors, Union Carbide, US Steel, right? These were huge companies at the time. And if you look, what is happening in New England, and this picture is from Maine, right, of the Nash auto dealer. And in New England, all the mills were happening and a lot of industry was going on. And then if you move forward here to 2012, you're looking at knowledge and service industries, right? The context, again, has shifted. So those companies that were around before who couldn't shift with the context are no longer with us. And in New Hampshire, again, you have the smart manufacturing and tourism. which are arguably knowledge and service industries, right? So even though you may be a small company and you may not realize it, you are caught up in the bigger context of what is going on. Now, as you look through the ages, there is only one company that has survived since 1896. Any guesses what that company might be? GE, right? Sorry, someone in the back knew it. They looked disappointed. So here's what it looks like, right? So you have 1896. You have American Tobacco making it all the way over here to 1928, and GE is the only one who has survived through the ages. Standard Oil's back here in 1928, now ExxonMobil, right? So GE has been able to survive because they have been able to shift with the context of the economy. And so the question isn't where are we today? The question is where are we going? Now, some of this is divining tea leaves, right? Because if I could ultimately predict every single thing that was going to happen in the future, despite all the great places I've been in, the wonderful life I've been having, I probably wouldn't be teaching. I'd probably be just hanging out somewhere, divining things, and people would come and visit me, and that would be a wonderful life. But we can look at what is happening around us to try and get a sense of where are we heading, right? And I didn't make this slide, so I apologize for it ahead of time. It's a little mind-boggling, but let me try and take you through it. This is from the World Council for Sustainable Business. And this was done as part of their Vision 2050 report. So these are large corporations trying to figure out where are we going to be in 2050 and what are the big challenges that are facing us. And what they said was they wanted to have dual goals of high human development with low ecological impact. So you can see here, down here along the bottom, is the UN Human Development Index going from 0.2 all the way over to 1. The higher up you are on that scale, all of the good things that we want to have happen. You have low child mortality rates, high literacy, generally a healthy, functioning society. Over here on the y-axis, this is the global hectares per person that we have on the planet to use. So in 1961, the world biocapacity was a little less than 4 hectares per person. In 2006, it's down below 2. Now you may notice something here. If you have, down here you have Africa and Asian countries, lower on the Human Development Index scale in general. And then these countries up here, the blues and the greens, tend to be Europe, North America, and they're really doing well on the Human Index scale, but there's a problem. If everybody lived like us, there would be no more planet, right? Because they're way outside of the ecological footprint. And so what the goal is and what these companies are talking about, everybody is racing for this little blue box right down here. So you can have high human development within the Earth's limits, right? So if you are a company right now and you are not thinking about how to get down here, you're essentially going to be, destroying not only the planet but yourself. And destroying the planet is a really bad economic move, right? So everyone is trying to race down here into this box. They're trying to push people up this way and push people down here. So if you look at the economic evolution of the economy, and this is a different way of showing those previous slides, but you have business performance right along this axis here going up. And over here you have the different industrial ages. So you have ag, industrial, information, and then each period you got a period of chaos and then continued growth, right? And we've all lived through this. And so one thing that people are asking themselves now is, and a question that is really germane is, what if 15 years ago you'd assume the internet was a fad, right? Because 15 years ago, if you can remember way back when, right, it was this weird thing you dialed up. It was really slow. It made a lot of annoying noises, right? Why could this be useful for anything? How would business look today if you had missed the internet age? And so what people are asking again is, where are we today? We're in this same period of chaos, but what does it look like? And what some people are saying is that we're entering into the age of sustainability. And now most of you here are familiar with, there's a million different definitions, but this one works pretty well. Business that are in harmony with the Earth's life support systems, and winning businesses produce outstanding financial environmental, and social results, right? Now, the radical company that I got this from, the eco-warrior company, is Staples, right? So businesses are thinking about this, all kinds of different businesses. And in fact, I was at a conference a few months ago in New York City that was put on by UBS and Bloomberg, and there was, I believe it, I want to say at least $2 trillion worth of assets represented in the room. And they were all talking about this issue, right? And talking and telling stories about how they had created shared value for their communities, the environment, as well as their bottom line, and how that was fundamentally changing around their businesses, right? So here is another model of sustainability, right? And again, with the social, environmental, and economic vitality, and doing everything here from the innovation and capital efficiency and all the kind of financial stuff to creating new jobs, improving human rights, diversity, as well as clean air, water, land, and all those things. And sustainability is right here in the middle. It's kind of the trifecta, if you're a horse racing fan, since we just had the Kentucky Derby a little while ago. Here's another way of looking at this. So here you have an old smokestack, traditional industry, and what you're trying to do here is put together, the people. That is a little person's face. It's not a small pig. It's a little child. Not mine, so it's okay to laugh at it. And here you have the earth and the profitability there, the people, profit, planet that we've all heard so much about. But the key here is creating shared value, right? So how are you creating value for all of those different stakeholders, and how in turn are you using your environmental performance to improve social performance, to improve your profitability, open up new markets, do lots of wonderful things. So is that a myth or is that real? Can you change that smokestack industry into something else? According to the Harvard Business Review, you can. In 2009, about a decade and a half after a lot of the early work in sustainable business, Harvard Business Review realized that, in fact, this is the mother lode of innovation. And you can get both top line and bottom line returns. So, coming out in Harvard Business Review, they were not exactly riding along enthusiastically trumpeting sustainability, right? So the companies in there and the companies who read this and the professors behind this are realizing that, wow, there is a lot of new stuff. And if you remember back to the surfing, this is about changing your perspective, right? So those guys who were surfing that 100-foot wave, they had to believe it was possible and see the new context. And when you see the new context and you have a new perspective, suddenly the room or the world or whatever it is looks a little different, right? And everybody talks about entrepreneurship, and entrepreneurship is just fundamentally getting a new perspective, right? So to me, this is so powerful because it will help you find this new perspective. And so you don't have to believe me, but this is a great chart here from a private equity group that was looking at the way they traditionally used to look at their acquisitions was it would just be risk mitigation, right? We're going to take over something. We want to find out what are the risks we have to mitigate when we buy this company. And then what they started saying was, well, wait a minute, we're looking at this all wrong. What if we looked at how we could improve their performance and use sustainability both to cut costs and to grow revenues? And so talk about unlikely bedfellows. This is the Carlyle Group who developed this protocol with Environmental Defense Fund, right? And I'm sure you're all familiar with the Carlyle Group. They're a pretty well-known private equity firm, and Environmental Defense Fund are coming together to try and figure out how do you create this shared value, and how do you engage in this. And believe me, the Carlyle Group would not be doing this if they did not think there was value in it. So here's a chart that shows you that sustainability companies are outperforming their peers in the public marketplace. And so the blue line here is low sustainability companies, and the red line is high sustainability companies. And this is, again, out of a Harvard Business Review working paper from 2011. And you can see here that the companies in the public markets are outperforming their peers. Now, what the professors who did this is they teamed up companies of approximately the same asset class, and then they ran them through a whole protocol to figure out who was a high sustainability performer and who was low, and these are the results. When you used to look at it traditionally and people saw sustainability as a zero-sum game, right? So it meant if I help out the environment or I do good things in the society, I take it out of my bottom line, right? And there is lots and lots and lots of evidence to show that this is no longer true. This just being one that came out pretty recently. So here's another one, and I promise this is the last, horrible slide here. But what people also talk about is this is great, and everybody wants to go to Whole Foods when the economy is great, right? Because they're flush. And what people oftentimes argue is that, well, sustainability can't work when the economy, is in the doldrums. And in fact, this study from A.T. Kearney looked at sustainability-focused companies during the economic downturn in 2008. And over here, you can see all the different parts of the economy they looked at, from utilities to telecommunications, all the way down to chemicals, automobile parts. Everywhere you see a green little bar here, this is the sustainability companies outperforming their peer group on both a 3-month and a 6-month scale. The gray bars here are when the industry actually did better than the sustainably focused companies, right? And that, to me, is just so telling. So even in an economic downturn, the sustainably focused companies outperform their peers in almost every category that these folks looked at. So when you're thinking about sustainability, and I'm really excited to hear these stories later in the day, because what I'm trying to do here is kind of a larger frame and talk about, and I want to hear the individual stories, because I bet people are going to be talking about advantages they found like these, right? If you are a sustainably focused company and creating this shared value, the new perspective you have is going to create all kinds of competitive advantages. Everything from reducing costs to improving customer loyalty to having new kind of value created, changing your mission, your direction, all these kinds of things. And these are real things that every single company in America would like, right? Who doesn't want to have employees that are more loyal, or reduce your costs, or have patient capital? So let's look at a way that you all can do this and kind of frame it up strategically. So if you look at, are you all familiar with the term the value chain? Right? Okay, I see some head nods and sort of begrudging, okay, yes, value chain. All right, so Michael Porter came up with this in the 80s. And the value chain is this amazing tool that you can use to really analyze and look at your company. So, and it's used all over by for-profits, nonprofits, social entrepreneurs, regular entrepreneurs, Fortune 500 companies. It's everywhere. State Department is even using it to evaluate development projects. So it's a really useful tool to take a look at your company and divide out all the tasks you're doing. So you have the inbound here. This is you're getting your stuff in. You're receiving things from outside. You have your operations, right? So for some of you, you're transforming different pieces into whatever the material is. Then you distribute your final products to other people. And then marketing and sales, we're all pretty familiar with. And then service. You're servicing your customer afterwards, right? And hopefully, if all goes well, that leads to some margins, right? And then you're happy, your investors are happy. So every company does this, right? Which is what's so cool about it, is you can apply this to a teeny tiny business or a huge corporation. So, but here's what's key about it. The different companies, depending on what they're doing, have different points of the value chain that are important. So let's look at Walmart, right? Walmart, they talk about saving people massive amounts of money, right? And they're everywhere. So if you look at Walmart, what they really do well and where they find competitive advantage is their inbound, right? Because they're having everything made offshore and they're bringing it in, but they're hyper efficient. And then their distribution system, because they're everywhere, right? Now, if you contrast that with Whole Foods, what you find is Whole Foods actually has different points of competitive advantage. And theirs is in operations, right, within the stores. And if you go into a Whole Foods like the one in Portland, Maine, what you'll notice is all the aisles are really small and tight in the center. And Whole Foods has maximized all the space around them with deli and produce and food bars, all the high value activities that actually make money for a supermarket, because the canned goods and stuff don't really make a whole lot. And then also service. Service is a key part of their value proposition. So for you, when you look at the purpose of your company or why you exist, your value chain will have different points that you can highlight. Okay? Everybody with me? All right, so this is really important. So, but wait a minute, there's nothing in there about the 3 Ps. So there's nothing in there about profit. So reducing your risk, cutting costs, or growing sales by using this concept of shared value. Or for the planet, getting rid of waste. A great word for waste is unsold production. Right? Stop thinking about it as waste. What if you start thinking about it as stuff I made that I just can't sell? Well, God, who wants that? And taking waste and making it a new resource, or are there ways you can make your business actually be regenerative versus depletive to the world? And then for people, it's really about these 3 things. You're building a better workplace, you're enhancing community, or you can also solve social issues. Think about that for a minute. How your business could solve social issues. How would that be for a business model? So we've altered the value chain a little bit, done 2 things to it. One is we've added in unsold production, right? Because if it's not up there and you're not looking for it, you'll never see it. So now you have to talk about your unsold production and what's happening. And then here's the other thing that we did, is we made it into a loop. So your unsold production is also now going into your inbound. So if you think about the earlier value chain, you had stuff out here before inbound. If you go all the way back, it's like the periodic table of the elements, right? And you're taking that periodic table, you get it in, transforming it, boom, 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 operations, outbound, marketing, service, and then whoosh, it's away, right? It's just gone afterwards because it's not on the value chain. So now we have unsold production. So we're trying to figure out what we're doing with all our waste, and then looping that around is really key. So try to use waste as a resource, your waste or somebody else's waste, okay? So let's just look at how companies are doing this and how, if you draw out your value chain and apply the shared value, the 3 Ps to it, which is why everything up there is a triangle, right? A triangle will keep haunting you forever. So you're going to run it through each of those triangles, looking for those sources of value that I mentioned back here. And as you run it through, say, all right, how can we be cutting costs, growing sales, reducing our waste, all of those things, okay? So let's take a look at some examples of people that are doing this. So not surprisingly, let's look at GE, our sole survivor, right? So their Eco-Imagination line, is making things like windmills, really efficient locomotives. If you hear the folks from GE talk who are part of Eco-Imagination, they'll tell you 2 things. One, they'll say green is green, or in China, green is red, because that's the color of their currency. They are making a fortune coming up with products that use less resources, alternative ways of doing stuff. It's growing faster than the rest of their company. They've added between 2005 and 2011 $105 billion in revenue, right? It's GE, all right, so it's $105 billion. They're a pretty big company. But they've also reduced their absolute greenhouse gas emissions, not relative to sales, absolute, by 29%. So the one thing they'll tell you is the green is green. The second thing they'll tell you is they have never had their people working harder. And in fact, in other companies I've talked to, this has been true. If you are doing something you care about, guess what? You work harder because you care. Staples says the same thing. They said they have never had people devoting so much time to their projects, and time in work and out of work, because they're thinking about it because they want to make a difference, right? No one wants to go to work and just work, right? Going back to what you were saying, that's not fun, right? You want to go and you want to make a difference in the world, and you want to make it profitable, and you want to do good work. So, by the way, if just Eco-Imagination was its own company, it'd be in the Fortune 150. So not too bad. They're doing all right. But they're GE, right? They're enormous. What's a smaller company supposed to do? Well, let's look at one. You all have probably heard of Grameen Bank, right? Founded by this guy here, Muhammad Yunus. He's a Nobel Peace Prize winner. So he figured out this. I got a great business model for you. Loan to the poorest people in the world, including beggars. Any banker will tell you, that's a great idea, right? Let's loan to people who have nothing. No assets, no nothing, and we're going to do it in really teeny tiny amounts. So you have really high transaction costs. Brilliant business model, right? And so, but this is what he did. You know, he wanted to solve a social problem, and so, and since they have been founded, they've loaned over $7 billion to 7.5 million people. By the way, this was started with $50. And Grameen Bank alone has loaned $7 billion. This doesn't count the tens of billions of dollars that have been loaned from all the other microfinance folks that are out there, right? And so having this new perspective and solving the social issue in this case really led to some incredible innovation. And you don't need to be GE to do it. So a couple other fun facts. These guys have been profitable all but 3 years since 1976. And they have a 98% repayment rate. 98%. Think about that in the context of the US mortgage crisis. We had double-digit rates of default from the most creditworthy people in the entire world. Right? Incredible. Incredible. And really, here, he was adjusting the whole, and on his value chain, the whole outbound model of banking changed, right? It wasn't come to our big branch inside and come apply for a loan. It's we're going to go out to the village. We're going to talk to people. We're going to have lending circles, right? And so they're adjusting their value chain, just like GE adjusted the operations to create these new opportunities. So let's talk about, just for a moment, about, I think, probably one of the biggest and most exciting things happening out there, which is really affecting the marketing and service aspects of the value chain. It's the shared economy, right? And they are redefining every industry. You know, I realized this morning that instead of Sunrun up there, who does alternative energy, I probably should have had Revision, because they're doing a similar kind of program, right? Where you don't buy the asset, you're renting it out from them, or you have shared Zipcar. The Zipcar model, where you have a shared resource of cars around town that you can access, is being done for everything, pretty much. I mean, everything from wedding dresses, prom dresses, textbooks, movies. I mean, it's out there in all these industries. And so if you think sustainability means you have to be the high-priced person, you're really not thinking hard enough, right? Because all of these folks, they have upended the business model completely. You don't have to buy a car anymore, right? You just have a car when you want it. And Kickstarter, for all of you are probably familiar with that as well, right? They are raising millions and millions of dollars for people and completely changing around the way you finance projects. And the other one, Airbnb, we'll talk about in just a minute. But again, so they are taking apart, they have looked into their value chain and are taking it apart and saying, how can we market and service? You know, I'm not relying on a big advertising campaign if I'm any of these companies. I'm marketing with the peer network going out to their friends and bringing them back in, right? The service is about creating a community. They started with a couple cars in downtown Boston, little green VWs. It's a $10 billion market, and they took the idea from Europe and incorporated a bunch of technology and other things into it. But again, starting really small, this is a small business, but this is why Avis acquired them. Because even though in a way you could say they're a car rental thing, if you are a Zipcar member or have been part of the experience, you'll see it's everything that a car rental company isn't, right? There's no hassle. You just go show up, you reserve the car online, you go there, you swipe your car, the car opens up. They pay for your gas, they pay for your insurance. There's no 20-minute negotiation at the counter over the size or style or whatever. You can pick the car you want. And by the way, they have BMWs, Mini Coopers, pickup trucks, Priuses, a whole bunch of different things. So suddenly, instead of having one car that sits all day long, you can have access to 20 or 30 cars of all different styles and makes and stuff. So this one still blows my mind, right? So last night, while we were all sleeping, 40,000 people rented accommodations from a service that offers 250,000 rooms in 30,000 cities in 192 countries and owns none of them. right? Incredible. So they're offering, you know, 250,000 rooms, and they don't own any of them. They're just facilitating people getting together and sharing resources. So as I said, this is redefining all kinds of industries. And if you go back to the value chain and you looked at what you're doing, you say, how can I rearrange my service model or my marketing to do this? It really upends things. So, and the peer-to-peer sharing is estimated to be about another $26 billion market. And The Economist just had a great article on this a little while ago. Are any of you familiar with this woman? You ever seen her before? Her name is Zhang Yin. Her net worth is $5.6 billion, and she's the richest woman in China. She owns a company called Nine Dragons. And you can see where we are here. We're in the unsold production phase part and in the inbound. So you may guess that here's how she made her money. Here's her brilliant idea. She came to the US. She picked up our trash. She picked up all our cardboard, was paid to take it away, right? Because who wants, you know, your trash? It's junk, it's garbage, right? It's waste. We're going to get rid of it. So she took our trash, took it back to China. The trash she took was cardboard, paperboard, remanufactured it into boxes, and sold it back to us. That is a great business model. You know, and the waste in the unsold production is an enormous opportunity. It is everywhere. So by some estimates, only about 1% of stuff that is dig up, manufactured, produced is still in use after 6 months. And you're talking over £1 million per person per year in the US economy is dug up, you know, built, all that stuff. So less than 1%. So the opportunities for efficiency here and for people to pick up our trash, you know, are enormous. And the things that we're just wasting now and the unsold production that we're producing. So just to review for a minute here, so it's a really simple 5-step process. It's a 5-step. There's always a 5-step plan, isn't there? So, you know, what is the purpose of your company? What are you doing? You know, are you Whole Foods and you're selling the highest quality organic produce out there and creating an amazing service experience? Are you, you know, on the other side of that, are you a Walmart and your purpose is just to sell things at a rock bottom price? So what is the purpose of your company? I'm not saying your mission, right, or your strategy, because both those terms get really muddy. What are you trying to do every single day, right? Why do you exist? So what is the purpose of what you're doing? And then, you know, where on that value chain are you creating competitive advantage, right? So what are the links that are most important to you? And by the way, all those things feed into each other, and it can be somewhat complicated, but just sketch it out. Take 5 minutes, sketch it out. Say, where do you think, if you looked at the whole value chain, what links are important to you? And then run it through that filter of the triangle and figure out what opportunities are out there that you're missing. How could you change what you're doing to build community, to enhance your profit, and build shared value, right? Where can you reduce costs? You're not always going to get a trifecta, but sometimes you'll get 2 or 3 things that will work. And you'll realize that, wow, you know what, if we do this, we can change our business model, and you can try something new. So innovate then, and once you've identified this and run it through that shared value cycle, actually try to implement these ideas and then repeat. You know, one of the things that every business tries to do is to have continuous innovation, right? To avoid that cycle of creative destruction we talked about in the beginning. And what happens, and what's so awesome about sustainability or building this kind of shared value that helps people, the planets, and profits, what's so amazing about that in terms of continuous innovation is that the bar always gets raised. You think you're doing something terrific today, and you find out there's a problem with it, and then you move on and you do the next thing. But if you can instill that kind of constant searching and looking for these new opportunities, it can really change what you're doing. And I'm sure some of the stories we're going to hear about later today are going to, will tell you that. But as you hear those stories, think back to this picture here in the value chain, and this shared value cycle, what we're calling it, and think about where are they making those changes and how is that affecting their business. Okay, so we've been at about the 30,000-foot kind of broad level, talking about the economy, well, we're talking about surfing, which is a great thing to talk about, and then talking about the economy, the creative destruction, looking at what other people are doing, and where is this next economic wave. And then what the piece for this is, how do you bring this into your company and use it to really find new opportunities? Right now, if all this seems a little overwhelming, what I would say is pick a couple things and evolve. This is one of my favorite 2x2 matrices of all time, which is saying something. So over here you have the impact or need from low to high, and this is how relatively difficult is it going to be for you to change. List out 10 quick initiatives. Throw them up on this 2x2. It'll be real quick, real fast, where you can change today, tomorrow, and then into the future, right? But this is a really simple way, and it's really honest. You put something up like, okay, we're going to change our company into be a sharing economy, and use a shared economy model. Okay, that may be in the difficult side, right? And maybe you don't even need that right now. So you can figure it out, and you can go with, the areas of high impact and low difficulty is what you're looking for, and pick a couple initiatives and just get started, right? Just get started. Don't be overwhelmed by all that you have to do. Pick the things you can do and start with those and then move forward. Now, just to wrap things up here with a quote from GE, who we've been talking a little bit about. This is great. This is from the CFO of GE, right? So think about that. Not the CSO, the CFO. And what they're saying is we came to the conclusion that we can make money by facing environmental challenges because our customers are demanding it. If other companies don't see that, then that's even better for us. And that's what you all need to be thinking about. Thank you very much.